The movie opens with a hardened U.S. Marine named Mike saying goodbye to a young woman at the airport. He boards a helicopter that rapidly lifts him toward his next mission. In the next scene, Mike and his spotter, Tommy, are positioned on a rugged cliff overlooking an expansive desert. They patiently wait for their target to appear. Tommy, ever the chatterbox, is full of small talk, while Mike, composed and serious, keeps silent. Soon, they observe a group of people on foot advancing from one side and several armed vehicles approaching from the opposite direction. Mike's target is identified as a 65-year-old terrorist named Saeed Asif. The tension is palpable as both men prepare for the inevitable confrontation. As Tommy's constant banter continues over the radio, urging Mike to take the shot, Mike suddenly notices that the group has gathered for a wedding. He realizes that his target might, in fact, be the groom's father. Matters become further complicated when both the groom and his bride inadvertently block the target. Mike is ordered to take out the groom in order to reach the target, but he finds himself unable to pull the trigger on an innocent life. Instead, he deceitfully informs his command center that he has lost sight of the target. Before long, the duo is spotted by armed men, guards protecting the wedding ceremony. A chaotic exchange of gunfire ensues. Amid the commotion, the target flees immediately, and both Mike and Tommy are forced to retreat as the armed men give chase. Confusion sets in. Who would become a terrorist just to guard a wedding couple in the middle of nowhere? During their desperate run, they accidentally damage their GPS system and are forced to take refuge behind a rock formation. Realizing the danger is imminent, the armed men begin to approach the rock where the duo is hidden. In a burst of quick thinking, Mike creates a clever diversion to send them in the opposite direction. After successfully evading the armed men, Mike and Tommy contact their headquarters for an evacuation. However, they are informed that the extraction point is 5 hours away, a village beyond the desert. With no alternative, they set out on foot, braving searing heat and relentless sandstorms as the desert swallows them whole. While trudging through the blistering desert, Tommy attempts to lighten the mood by entertaining Mike with stories about his son back home. Observing Mike's silence and troubled expression, Tommy prods him to open up. Reluctantly, Mike confesses that he is struggling with proposing to his girlfriend Jenny. Tommy teases him good-naturedly for being so scared, but also offers advice. Marriages can be challenging at first, but over time, you learn and grow. Their conversation adds a humanizing layer to the tension, even in the midst of chaos. As they continue across the barren landscape, a gust of wind sends a warning sign tumbling right beneath their feet. Mike takes this omen seriously, recalling that over the past 40 years, 33 million landmines have been buried in the desert. Tommy, however, shrugs off the incident, insisting that it might just be a Berber trick designed to keep enemies at bay. The conflicting perspectives only add to the uncertainty of their perilous journey. Still on high alert, Mike proceeds cautiously while his mind remains fixed on the ominous warning sign. Tommy, ever the carefree spirit, walks backward a few yards ahead of Mike, teasing him for overthinking every detail. Suddenly, a faint click is heard, a sound that forewarns danger, and then an explosion rocks the ground. It becomes tragically clear that Tommy has stepped on a landmine. As Tommy momentarily loses his hearing from the blast, Mike takes a tentative step toward him. Then another ominous click echoes as Mike's foot lands, freezing him in shock as sand slowly clears to reveal the aftermath. Miraculously, Tommy survives the explosion, but the cost is severe. His legs below the knees have been amputated. In excruciating pain, Tommy screams and trembles as Mike struggles to calm him. With every second critical, Mike recalls Tommy's young son back home, using the thought as motivation to carefully inject himself with morphine, medicine that every Marine carries in the front pocket for crises like these. Desperation sets in as Tommy attempts to reach for his radio, but the agonizing pain overtakes him. Seeing his partner writhe in suffering, Mike offers to remove the landmine from Tommy's foot in a bid to help. He speculates that the mine, perhaps, is old and inactive. However, Tommy, in a final act of defiance, warns him not to proceed. To dissuade Mike further, Tommy pulls out his gun and aims it at his own head, insisting that he must survive at all costs, even if it means sacrificing himself. In a heart-wrenching moment, Tommy tells Mike that he must live, then tragically shoots himself. Mike's cry of grief echoes into the silent desert. Now utterly alone in the vast, unforgiving expanse, Mike finds himself immobilized and overwhelmed by despair. After a long, agonizing pause, he finally lowers himself onto one knee. Realizing that he must somehow fetch the radio that lies several yards away from Tommy's body, Mike devises a plan, tying one end of his shoelace to an axe in a bid to drag the radio closer. When Mike retrieves the radio, he discovers that its battery is dead and that the spare is attached to Tommy's body. Crestfallen but not defeated, Mike hatches another idea. Using salvaged parts and his resourceful ingenuity, he constructs a makeshift solar charger. After several tense moments, the improvised system comes to life, and Mike is finally able to contact his superiors. He urgently requests an immediate evacuation. Unfortunately, he is informed that rescue helicopters cannot operate in the area due to frequent sandstorms. After some frustrating back and forth, Mike learns that if all goes well, a convoy will rescue him in approximately 52 hours. As if the situation weren't dire enough, a massive sandstorm suddenly sweeps in with full force. Mike hunkers down, enduring the fury of the wind while remaining motionless in his vulnerable spot. When the storm subsides, one unexpected result surprises him. Tommy's body, and crucially the spare battery, has been carried right next to him by the swirling sands, though the radio itself has drifted just out of reach. Hours turn into an agonizing wait as Mike's water supplies dwindle. Desperation and fatigue push him to the brink, and in a moment of dark introspection, he contemplates ending his own life. Just then, he notices a Berber man approaching in a peculiar zigzag pattern. Mike calls out, warning the man about the active landmine, but the Berber merely mimics his gesture, as if to tease him. Mike attempts to recount his ordeal to the Berber, hoping for sympathy or assistance, but the man insists that Mike must take the next step on his own. In a surprising turn, the Berber takes Mike's water flask and disappears into the endless desert. Dehydrated and desperate, Mike resorts to drinking his own urine until a small Berber girl ambles toward him, holding his water flask. Relief floods over him as he sees it brimming with water once more. The silent little girl hands Mike his flask, and he gratefully quenches his thirst. Though she never speaks, using her toy soldiers as a sort of silent language, she seems to signal to Mike that he must step off the landmine and keep moving. Struggling with his own injury, Mike tells her that he cannot move, and he pleads with her to bring him his radio. Confused by his request, the girl doesn't understand and hesitates. Enjoying the story so far? Subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support powers our adventures. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive back into the adventure. In his growing desperation, Mike raises his voice too loudly, frightening the small girl away. As dusk falls over the desert and the temperature begins to plummet, Mike starts a small fire to stave off the biting cold. The eerie sounds of wild animals begin to echo around him. In an effort to distract himself from the loneliness and the pain, he takes out his phone and scrolls through photographs of his beloved girlfriend, Jenny. Soon, he finds a video message from her. In it, Jenny reassures him that she is waiting for him, giving him a flicker of hope. Moved to tears, Mike resolves that he must win this war and return to her as soon as possible. Overcome with emotion, he is gripped by the fear that he might never see Jenny again. Exhausted from his ordeal, he starts to doze off, only to jerk awake as he notices that the dying fire has gone out. Darkness envelops him, and to his horror, he realizes he is now surrounded by wild animals. Frantically, Mike fires his gun in an attempt to scare the animals away, but his shots prove futile. He regrets not watching more survival shows like Man vs. Wild. In the ensuing chaos, the wild animals begin to drag Tommy's lifeless body away. One particularly aggressive animal starts advancing toward Mike, but using his torch as a distraction, he manages to shoot it with his handgun. The animal lands on a nearby landmine, causing an explosion that sends a plume of sand and smoke into the air and momentarily scatters the other creatures. As morning approaches, the same Berber man reappears. The Berber explains to Mike that he is incredibly lucky to have survived this ordeal, even after stepping on a landmine and enduring an entire night in the desert with wild animals. He reiterates that Mike must continue forward. Mike hesitates, pointing out that the Berber might know the locations of the mines as his zigzag walk seems oddly calculated. The Berber shrugs, explaining that he only walks in a zigzag because it's safer than going in a straight line without any guarantee about where the landmines lie. Still, Mike pleads with him to fetch his radio once again. Finally, the Berber man agrees and returns with the radio. Grateful yet exhausted, Mike checks his watch and sees that there are still 24 hours left until help is expected. The exhaustion begins to take its toll, and Mike starts to hallucinate. He envisions Tommy coming back to life, offering him motivation and the promise that he will survive. As the sun sets again over the endless dunes, Mike reflects on every mistake he has made in life. Regret and sorrow swell within him, especially as he recalls leaving Jenny behind. He soon finds himself surrounded by wild animals once more. This time, even the explosions of nearby mines do little to deter them. In the darkness, Mike fires aimlessly at the creatures, fighting desperately for his life as his thoughts spiral into despair. When dawn finally breaks, Mike finds himself back in reality. The wild animals that attacked him lay motionless and defeated around him. Against all odds, he managed to fend off his attackers even while outnumbered. For the past 45 grueling hours, he has remained stranded in the desert. Just as hope seems to wane, a crackling communication comes through on his radio from a senior officer. They inform him that the rescue team is delayed and ask if he can hold on for another 17 hours. Already at his breaking point, Mike responds that he cannot go any longer. In a surprising twist, the Major mentions that someone wishes to speak with him. Moments later, Mike hears the familiar, gentle voice of his girlfriend, Jenny. Mike immediately launches into a torrent of apologies over the radio, apologizing for abandoning her, for all the mistakes, and for the destruction of everything he touches. Overwhelmed, he begins to hallucinate once more. In his mind's eye, Jenny appears, sitting on a cozy couch in the midst of the desert. He desperately reaches out to her, but his strength is fading fast. Just as he starts collapsing, the Berber reappears out of nowhere. This time, the man doesn't leave. Instead, he tends carefully to Mike's wounds. He recounts his own painful story of when stepping on a mine cost him his leg. He explains that losing his leg felt like losing everything in life. Yet the Berber's sorrow is tempered by a bright memory. He recalls how the pain was eventually washed away when he met his wife and had a daughter. He tells Mike that, no matter the hardships, one must keep moving forward. Touched by the man's story, Mike manages a weak smile and mentions that he feels lucky. His rescuer's daughter, who once brought him water, was incredibly beautiful and had inherited her father's smile. The Berber's tone turns somber as he reveals that his daughter did not survive. She perished in a mine explosion during one of their perilous outings, trying to clear the mines and replace them with tin cans. Stunned and unable to fully grasp the weight of this revelation, Mike listens in silence as the Berber tells him that he is glad his daughter's memory met Mike's need for hope, but that now it is time for Mike to move forward with his life. Shortly thereafter, the Berber departs. In a moment of intense hallucination, Mike sees a vision of his own daughter, but as quickly as she appears, she fades away with the desert wind. The visions intensify as Mike's mind conjures images of his abusive father, a haunting reminder of his troubled past, and he is overcome with the painful memories of his terminally ill mother and the happier moments he once shared with Jenny. At that very moment, the radio crackles to life with an urgent message. The rescue team is now passing by, and they need Mike to transmit his exact location. Determined to seize his chance, he fumbles for his flare. However, before he can use it, Terrorists, reminiscent of those from earlier in his mission, open fire on him from over the hill. The barrage of gunfire triggers a nearby mine to explode, causing the flare to be knocked from Mike's hand and sent hurtling off into the distance. Though he weakly attempts to return fire, his strength is nearly spent. But then, driven by the memory of Jenny and the determination to survive, Mike finds a new resolve. He begins shooting at the ground with his handgun, deliberately triggering several mine explosions. The resulting clouds of sand and smoke provide him a temporary shield from the enemy fire. Seizing the moment, he quickly grabs his sniper rifle and methodically eliminates the terrorists one by one. As the rescue convoy passes nearby, the flare still remains out of his reach. In that quiet moment amid the chaos, Mike recalls the Berber man's words, "You have to keep moving on." With a deep, fortifying breath, he takes a literal leap of faith and steps forward. Nothing catastrophic occurs. He soon discovers that the mine on which he had been standing was nothing more than a tin can, likely a decoy planted by the Berber's daughter when she was alive. The Berber's earlier words echo in his mind. All along, the man had advised him that he could finally move forward with his life and reunite with Jenny. The only barrier, Mike realizes, was the crippling fear that had held him captive for so long. Overwhelmed by relief and emotion, Mike breaks down in tears. Even though he has sustained several non-lethal gunshot wounds during the standoff, his survival now feels like a second chance at life. In that quiet, solitary moment, Mike is not sure whether he is relieved for being saved or angry at the turn his life has taken. One thing is crystal clear. This ordeal has transformed him, leaving him with a valuable and painful lesson about perseverance. With a final act of determination, Mike fires his flare one last time and collapses on the unforgiving desert floor. Soon after, the rescue team reaches his location. Mike is extracted from the desert and eventually returns home. Back at the airport, Jenny awaits him with joyful tears streaming down her face. Before embracing her, Mike drops to one knee, a timeless gesture of hope and redemption. With heartfelt sincerity, he proposes to her, promising that he will never leave her side again. In that tender moment, they both acknowledge that no matter how hard life gets, they will move forward, one step at a time.